The bell above Sweetwater Creamery jingled once, and Kilo lunged before anyone could say his name. The dog did not bark. He drove his long muzzle into the canvas bag on Kelsey Dawson's shoulder and tore the strap with 2 quick, surgical bites. Kelsey stumbled backward against the glass case, one hand flying to the low curve of her belly. Something small and black skittered across the tile floor and stopped between the officer's boots. Beside it lay a folded photograph, edges soft with handling, and on that photograph her own face had been carefully crossed out in red marker. Before we go any further, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're listening from, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stories like this one. Kelsey could not breathe. She wanted to reach for the bag, for the little square of glossy paper, for anything that might undo the last 3 seconds. Her free hand held the swell of her belly, the way a mother holds a stranger at a crowded station, protective and confused all at once. She was 36 weeks along. She had come into Sweetwater Creamery for a scoop of strawberry ice cream and a plastic spoon, because Riverbend, Ohio was hot in the middle of July, and she had promised the little life inside her something sweet after the morning she had endured at the walk-in clinic. The officer, whose brass tag read Hartman, crouched down without touching the object. He murmured a single soft word, and the dog sat, ears still turning like small radar dishes toward the door, the window, the parking lot. Miles Hartman was maybe 6'2", with tan forearms and pale eyes, and the kind of stillness that made loud rooms quiet. He drew a napkin from the counter dispenser and lifted the little device off the floor with careful fingers. He looked at Kelsey the way a man looks at someone who has just walked out of a burning building without knowing there was a fire. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "this is a tracker. Somebody put this in your bag." Kelsey wanted to say that was impossible. She had only been in Riverbend for 11 weeks. She had left Colorado in the middle of a February night with a duffel and a lie about visiting family. She had taken her mother's maiden name off her birth certificate and made it her name, because Dawson sounded like something a woman could hide behind. She had told no one but her sister Marisol where she was going, and Marisol had cried on the phone and then agreed to burn the letter Kelsey mailed her from a truck stop in Salina, Kansas. Kelsey looked at the photograph. It was of her, standing on a beach in Oregon, wearing a striped sundress she had thrown away in Nebraska. Somebody had drawn an X across her face with a marker the color of a stop sign. She knew that marker. She knew the pressure of the strokes, the way the ink pooled in the corners. She had watched a hand hold that marker against the wall of a closet 6 inches from her cheek, while she pressed both palms against the plaster and tried not to cry. Her stomach tightened, a slow band of iron pulling itself around her middle. She reached out for the counter and missed. Miles rose in one motion and caught her elbow with a grip that felt more like a chair than a hand. "Easy," he said. "Sit. Right here." He guided her to the low wooden bench by the window. The teenager behind the counter, a girl with a name tag that read Presley, was already picking up the phone. Kilo padded over and rested his blocky head against Kelsey's knee, warm and dense as a river stone. Kelsey looked down at him, at the small scar over one eyebrow, at the amber eyes that did not blink. He was not a pet. He was a working animal, muscled and quiet, and he had picked her out of a line of customers as clearly as if she had been wearing a bell. She wondered how a dog knew what a red X meant. She was pretty sure a dog did not. She was pretty sure a dog knew the smell of an electronic component, or the smell of a man who had touched Kelsey without permission, or the smell of fear when it soaked all the way through a sundress. She said, without meaning to, "His name is Derek Vaughan." Miles paused with his radio halfway to his mouth. "Say that again. The man who put that in my bag. His name is Derek Vaughan. He's from Denver. He is not supposed to know where I am." Miles nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods when he decides not to ask another question until later. He keyed the radio. His voice went low and calm. He asked for Sergeant Pritchard, and he asked for an ambulance, and he asked for a plate check on any pickup with Colorado tags parked within 4 blocks of Sweetwater Creamery. He did not raise his voice. He did not look away from Kelsey. That was when Kelsey saw him. Across Main Street, tucked into the recessed doorway of Fisher's Hardware, a tall man in a grey ball cap stood with a paper coffee cup in his hand, watching the front window of the creamery. He was leaner than she remembered. He had grown a beard, but she knew the way he stood. She knew the way one shoulder hung a fraction lower than the other because of the football injury he had refused to have set. She knew the tilt of his head when he was pretending not to be angry. The band across her belly tightened again, harder. She pressed her palm flat to the glass and pointed with a finger she could not hold still. "That's him," she said, and her voice came out louder than she expected. "That is Derek Vaughan in the grey cap." Miles did not turn to look. He believed her. He said something into the radio in a voice that was suddenly not calm at all, and Kilo was already on his feet, tail low, coiled. The door of the creamery opened, and 2 more officers came in from the side lot, and everything after that happened in the pale, slow-motion way. Important moments happen when a person has been running from them for a long time. Derek saw them. He turned as if to walk into the hardware store, thought better of it, and broke into a run for a red pickup at the curb. Miles said one short word, and Kilo went through the door as if the door had insulted him. Kelsey watched from the bench, one hand on her belly and one hand on the window, as the Belgian Malinois closed a full block of daylight in less than 8 strides and put his teeth into the sleeve of Derek Vaughan's jacket without breaking the skin under it. Derek went down hard on the asphalt, the coffee cup rolling away, the ball cap tumbling into the gutter. 2 officers were on him before Kilo could reset his grip. Derek shouted something Kelsey could not hear through the glass. It looked, from her seat on the bench, like her own name. She lowered her forehead to the window and closed her eyes. Sergeant Angela Pritchard arrived within 10 minutes. She was a woman of about 45, with silver at her temples and a face that had known bad days and gone back to work anyway. She sat down beside Kelsey on the bench, took the tracker in its napkin from Miles, examined it under the light from her phone, and her mouth went thin. She pulled out a small evidence bag from her pocket, set the device inside, and looked at Kelsey. "Ma'am, when was the last time your bag was out of your sight?" Kelsey tried to remember. She had gone to the clinic that morning. She had left the bag in a pale grey plastic chair while she used the restroom for a urine sample. She had left it on the bench in the park after the clinic while she called Marisol on the burner phone. She had left it hanging on the hook of a bathroom stall at the pharmacy after that. "Any of those?" she said. "All of those?" "I don't know." Angela nodded. "This model. I've seen this model exactly once before. Denver PD flagged it in a bulletin 3 months ago. Domestic case. Man wanted on 2 active warrants. Weapons and aggravated assault. Same manufacturer, same little battery pocket." Miles came back through the door. He crouched in front of Kelsey without touching her. "Ma'am, that is Derek Vaughan. He had a burner phone, a folding knife, and a set of Ohio plates that don't belong to the truck he was driving. He also had this." He held up in a gloved hand a second folded photograph. This one was of a nursery, a little wooden crib with a mobile hanging over it. On the wall behind the crib, somebody had painted 3 careful letters in the soft cursive Kelsey had picked at the paint store 2 weeks ago. H.A. and D. Hope Ann Dawson. She had not told a single soul what she was going to name the baby. "That's inside my apartment," Kelsey whispered. "That's inside my apartment right now." Angela stood up, keyed her own radio, and started calling for a unit to go to the 2nd floor walk-up on Sycamore Street. Miles put his hand on Kelsey's forearm, very lightly. "Ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital. You're contracting." She had known that. She had been ignoring it since the 2nd X. She let him help her up. Kilo padded alongside, close enough that his shoulder brushed her hip, as if he had decided, without consulting anyone, that this was now his job. 6 hours later, in a quiet room at Riverbend Memorial Hospital, Kelsey Dawson held a small, warm daughter she named Hope Ann Dawson, and she cried the way a person cries after holding their breath for a very long time. The baby weighed 6 pounds and 11 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and a soft, indignant mouth that pulled down at the corners exactly the way Kelsey's mother's mouth had done in every photograph Kelsey owned of her. The doctor said her lungs were strong. The nurse said her heart rate was perfect. Kelsey pressed her lips to the top of Hope's warm head and could not think of a single thing to say. Miles Hartman knocked once on the door and set a paper cup of strawberry ice cream on the tray table. Kilo, allowed in as a working animal, laid his blocky head near the baby's feet on the pale blue blanket and let out one long, satisfied sigh. Kelsey laughed for the first time in almost a year, and it came out watery and shaky and small. "How are we doing?" Miles said. Not really a question. "We are doing," Kelsey said. She looked up at him. He had washed his face. There was a faint red mark on the side of his neck where somebody had swung at him and missed. "Thank you," she said. "I don't have any bigger words than that, I'm sorry." "You don't need bigger words," Miles said. Angela Pritchard came in after that with a legal pad and a soft voice, and she asked the questions she had to ask. Kelsey answered them. She told the story of a woman who had married the son of a well-known Denver contractor at 22, who had believed the black eyes were an accident until they were not, who had escaped to a shelter on the west side of the city and then out of the city entirely, who had learned the difference between a scared woman and a hunted one. She told them about the closet. She told them about the red marker. She told them about the night she had crawled out a back window and walked 7 miles along the shoulder of Federal Boulevard to a truck stop that had a woman working the counter with kind eyes. Angela wrote it all down. When Kelsey was finished, Angela said, "Miss Dawson, we've got him. He's not walking out of a courtroom for a very long time. But I need you to understand something. This is not the end of the story. It is only the end of one chapter of it, and I would be lying to you if I told you the next chapter is going to be easier." Kelsey looked down at Hope. "Nothing about this has been easy." "No," Angela said, "but the man who wanted to hurt you did not put a tracker in your bag by himself. He didn't drive from Denver to Riverbend without help. He didn't get into your apartment and take a photograph of your nursery without somebody letting him in. He had a partner in this town, and we are going to find them." Kelsey did not cry then. She had cried enough. She just held her daughter closer. 2 days later, Kelsey and Hope came home, and home was a 2-bedroom walk-up above Merle Fisher's hardware store on Sycamore, with a small tin balcony overlooking a magnolia tree, and a landlady named Verna Whitfield, who baked corn muffins and never asked questions. Verna met Kelsey at the top of the stairs with the baby's car seat in her arms, cooing at Hope like a woman who had waited a long time to hold something small. "Oh, sugar," Verna said. "Oh, sugar, sugar, sugar. Look at that mouth on this angel." The apartment had been swept for devices. Angela had told Kelsey what they had found. 2 more trackers, one behind the vent grill above the refrigerator, one taped underneath the plastic bassinet Kelsey had assembled the week before. A 3rd device, a small audio bug, in the base of the lamp on the nightstand. Kelsey did not want to be in the apartment. She stood at the door with Hope on her shoulder and looked at the small square of magnolia and could not go inside. "You come to my place, sweetheart," Verna said. "You come stay with me for a week. My spare room is made up. My cat sleeps in the hall. I've got a rocking chair by the window that would break your heart." Kelsey almost said yes. She almost let her knees go and let Verna Whitfield carry her the way Verna was carrying Hope's car seat. Then Miles Hartman came up the stairs behind her, and Kilo padded up behind him, and Kilo stopped 3 steps below the landing and did not come up any farther. The dog stared at Verna. His ears did not move. He did not growl. He simply stood on the 3rd step down and would not put a paw on the landing. Miles looked at Kilo, and then he looked at Verna, and then he looked at Kelsey, and Kelsey watched something rearrange itself inside his eyes. "Mrs. Whitfield," Miles said, very politely, "would you mind coming down to the station with me this afternoon, just for a conversation? Nothing formal." Verna's mouth did a small thing that was not quite a smile. She said, "Sugar, of course. I'll be there right after I put the muffins in the freezer." Verna Whitfield did not come to the station that afternoon. Verna Whitfield's Buick was found the next morning in the parking lot of a strip mall in Chillicothe, unlocked and empty. A neighbor said she had left in a hurry with 2 suitcases. Angela came by the apartment with Miles that evening, and she sat on the couch and looked at Kelsey and told her that Verna Whitfield's real name was Marlene Vaughn, and that she was Derek's aunt on his father's side, and that she had moved to Riverbend 9 months earlier, 6 weeks before Kelsey had ever mentioned Riverbend on the phone to Marisol. Kelsey went cold from the inside out. She had been set up. Verna's apartment listing had come to her through a mutual friend of Marisol's, a woman named Ruth Cabrera in Nebraska, who ran a resource line for women trying to disappear. Verna had offered a rent that was low enough to look like kindness. Verna had brought corn muffins on the first day. Verna had helped Kelsey pick out the paint color for the nursery. Verna had said in the pale light of a Tuesday afternoon that the baby's name ought to have hope in it somewhere, Sugar, because a baby is nothing if she is not a small pocket of hope. Kelsey had listened. Kelsey had agreed. "How did she find Ruth Cabrera?" Kelsey said, and her voice was almost a whisper. Angela looked at Miles. Miles did not look away from the wall. Angela said carefully, "Ms. Dawson, we're looking into that. But we need to consider the possibility that Ruth Cabrera did not know she was talking to a plant, and we need to consider the possibility that she did." Kelsey did not sleep that night. She sat in the rocker by the window with hope on her chest and watched the magnolia move in the streetlight. She thought about Ruth Cabrera's voice on the phone, warm and slow, asking about her due date. She thought about Marisol, 3 states away, 3 time zones away, 3 lives away, and she thought that if Marisol were in danger, she would not know how to survive it. She called Marisol at 4 in the morning on the burner phone. Marisol answered on the second ring. "Kels, is she okay? Are you okay?" "We're both okay," Kelsey said. "Mars, I need you to listen to me. I need you to leave the house tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight, I don't care where you go. Go to Aunt Reba's, go to a hotel, go anywhere. Just get out of that house until I call you back." Marisol was quiet for a long second. Then Marisol said softly, "Someone left flowers on the porch yesterday. There wasn't a card." Kelsey closed her eyes. "Go," she said. "Now." Marisol went. She drove 3 hours to their Aunt Reba's cabin in the pines above Estes Park, and she stayed there for 2 weeks. And in that time, she called Kelsey twice a day from a landline, and she did not sleep well either. Angela Pritchard called Denver PD, and Denver PD sent an officer to Marisol's house, and that officer found a small camera taped underneath the eaves above the front door, angled at the mailbox, wired into the porch light. Whoever had put it there had been watching Marisol for at least a month. The little tracker in Sweetwater Creamery had been the tip of something that went a lot deeper than a jealous ex with a folding knife. Angela sat in Kelsey's kitchen a week later with a mug of tea going cold in her hands, and she told Kelsey what her team had put together. Derek Vaughn's father, Wallace Vaughn, was a general contractor in the Denver suburbs. Wallace's contracting company had won 3 separate municipal bids in the last 2 years, and every one of those bids had been signed off on by a city inspector named Todd Reeder, who had spent 13 years in Denver before transferring to a small office in Colorado Springs. Todd Reeder and Wallace Vaughn had been fraternity brothers at Colorado State in the late 90s. Todd Reeder was under federal investigation for accepting money in exchange for signing off on structural inspections that never happened. 2 of the buildings he had signed off on had failed catastrophically. One of the failures had killed a construction worker named Elias Moreno. Elias Moreno had left behind a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. Kelsey listened, and she felt her stomach turn. "I saw the paperwork," she said. Angela's eyes flicked up. Kelsey nodded slowly. "On Derek's desk. About 1.5 years ago, I was looking for the checkbook because the water company was going to shut us off. I opened the wrong drawer. There was a folder in it, and I only read a page or two, but the page had a phone number for Todd Reeder on it and a list of dollar amounts. I thought it was a business thing. I closed the drawer and I forgot about it. That was, I think, 6 weeks before he broke my wrist." Angela set down her tea. "You know what you just told me, right? I told you I saw the paperwork." "Ms. Dawson," Angela said gently, "you are the reason he needs you gone. He does not need you gone because he loves you. He does not need you gone because he cannot let go. He needs you gone because you are the only person who saw the folder in that drawer, and if that folder ever gets found, and if you are ever asked what was in it, his father goes to federal prison, and Todd Reeder goes to federal prison, and everything the Vaughn family has spent 40 years building comes apart." Kelsey looked down at the baby in her arms. Hope was asleep, with one small pink fist tucked against her cheek. "He would have killed me," Kelsey said. "He would have tried," Angela said. "He did try. That's what the closet was about. That's what the truck at the curb was about. That's what the woman upstairs was about. He wasn't going to let you have this baby. Not because he wanted a baby. Because a baby means a mother in a courtroom, testifying about a drawer she opened once." Kelsey stood up carefully because Hope was sleeping, and she went and put the kettle back on. She stood at the counter with her hand on the tile, and she felt something small and hard settle inside her chest. It was not fear anymore. It was the opposite of fear. It was a decision. "Then let me testify," she said. Angela did not smile, because it was not a smiling kind of moment, but she nodded once, and she said, "Good. We're going to do this the right way. There's a federal task force. There's a U.S. attorney out of Denver who has been waiting for someone like you for 8 months. But we are going to keep you safe while we do it. Do you understand? You do not go outside without one of us. You do not answer the door for anyone you do not know. You do not talk to anyone about this except me and Detective Hartman and the attorney I am going to introduce you to." Kelsey nodded. "What about Ruth Cabrera?" Angela's face did the small closing down thing again. "We are going to have a conversation with Ruth Cabrera." Ruth Cabrera cried on the phone. Kelsey listened over the speaker in Angela's office, with Miles standing quietly at the window. Ruth had not known. Ruth swore she had not known. Ruth had gotten Verna Whitfield's contact information from a woman in Cheyenne named Diane Halloran, who ran a similar informal network for women getting out. Diane Halloran did not exist. There was no Diane Halloran in Cheyenne. There was, however, a phone number that had once been registered to a Shell LLC out of a strip mall in Aurora, Colorado, and that LLC had one line item on its tax filings, a payment of $840 to a bookkeeping firm in Boulder that also did the books for Wallace Vaughn. The web was already there. They just had to trace the threads. Kelsey and Hope moved into a small clapboard house on the east side of Riverbend that afternoon, a rental owned by Angela Pritchard's uncle, a retired shop teacher named Ronnie who wore suspenders and had built the porch swing himself. There was a chain-link fence in the yard, and a motion light above the driveway, and a bolt on the inside of the bedroom door that Ronnie had put in personally the night before Kelsey moved in. Miles brought Kilo by every evening for the first week, and Kilo would trot the perimeter of the yard once and lie down under the porch swing with his blocky head on his paws. And Kelsey would sit with Hope and drink black coffee that had gone cold in the cup, and she would breathe, sometimes for the first time all day when she saw the shape of the dog under the swing. She was not in love with Miles Hartman. She was pretty sure Miles Hartman was not in love with her. There was no room for that in a life like this. But there was a soft, careful thing that grew between them anyway. made out of the way he took his boots off at the front door, and the way she saved him half a slice of pound cake, and the way Hope, at 3 weeks old, had turned her head toward the sound of his voice, as if she already knew it. Miles did not overstep. He asked before he came in. Every single time. He never sat on the couch unless she had sat down first. He treated her like a person who had been made to feel small for a long time, and who needed the exact opposite of small for a while. He told her on the 9th night, sitting on the top step of the porch with Kilo lying between his feet, that his younger sister had been killed in a house in Kentucky 9 years earlier by a man who had also promised he would never hurt her again. That was why he had trained as a K9 handler. That was why he had come to Riverbend. That was why he had picked Kilo out of a litter in Michigan and driven him home in the passenger seat of his cruiser with a chew toy in his lap. Miles did not tell Kelsey this to make her feel obligated to him. He told her because she had asked quietly why he was still there at 10:30 at night, and he did not want to lie to her. Kelsey did not say anything for a long minute. She just put her hand very lightly on his forearm and left it there for exactly as long as it took her to figure out what she wanted to say. And then she said, "I'm sorry about your sister." He said, "I'm glad you're here." She said, "So am I." It was not the kind of thing anybody would ever put in a story about heroes and villains, but it was true, and it mattered. The federal attorney out of Denver was a woman named Priya Anand, who wore a navy suit and rectangular glasses and spoke in complete sentences. She came to Riverbend twice in the 2nd month. She sat at Ronnie's kitchen table with a laptop and a stack of banker's boxes, and she walked Kelsey through the paperwork she had seen in the drawer. Kelsey remembered more than she had thought she would. She remembered a corner of a page torn in a specific way. She remembered a coffee ring in the shape of a comma. She remembered the letterhead. She remembered the phrase compensation for expedited certification. She remembered a signature that started with a T and had a long loop under it. Priya took notes with a fountain pen, and every so often she would look up at Kelsey over the top of her glasses and say something like, "Ms. Dawson, that is very useful," which was the closest Priya ever came to enthusiasm. Kelsey liked her enormously. They set the grand jury for the 3rd week of October. Between the first meeting with Priya and the 3rd week of October, 3 things happened. The first thing was that Marisol drove out from Colorado. She arrived at Ronnie's little house on a Wednesday afternoon with a hatchback full of second-hand baby clothes and a plastic grocery bag of green chilies. And she screamed when she saw Hope, and she hugged Kelsey until Kelsey could not breathe, and she cried for a full 40 minutes on the porch swing. Marisol stayed for 3 weeks. She washed dishes. She sang lullabies in Spanish that their mother had sung. She braided Kelsey's hair the way she had done when they were little girls. On the 2nd night, she sat on the edge of Kelsey's bed and said quietly, "I never should have made you go. I never should have made you leave alone. I should have driven with you. I've been a bad sister, Kels. I should have been in that truck." Kelsey took her sister's face in both hands and said, "You saved my life. You saved this baby's life. You listened to me. You are the best sister anybody ever had. And if you ever say that to me again, I will be very rude to you." Marisol laughed and cried at the same time, and Kelsey did too. And Hope, who was in the bassinet at the foot of the bed, decided the moment called for a loud, sustained complaint, and both women stopped crying to laugh. The second thing was that Derek Vaughan, who had been arraigned on state charges of aggravated stalking, unlawful use of a tracking device, felony menacing, and violation of a protection order, and who had been denied bond twice, briefly slipped out of custody during a medical transport at the county hospital. It happened at 11:12 on a Tuesday morning. He had complained of chest pain. He had been placed in a wheelchair, When the transport officer had gone into a supply closet to retrieve a gurney, Derek had stood up, walked out a service door, and disappeared into the truck yard of a bakery across the alley. Angela came to Ronnie's house within the hour. Her jaw was set so tight, Kelsey could see the muscle jump. Miles was already there. Kilo was under the porch swing. Angela sat down on the top step and said, "He is not going to get near you. Every deputy in 3 counties is looking for him. But I need you to stay inside. Do not answer the door. Do not go to the window. If you hear a car in the driveway that is not one of ours, you take Hope, and you go into the bathroom, and you lock the door, and you call me on the direct line." Kelsey nodded. She was calm, in the way people are calm, when the calm is a decision. "How did he get out?" she said. Angela's mouth moved into a shape Kelsey had not seen on her face before. He had help. He had help from inside the hospital, or from inside the sheriff's office, or from both. Someone left that service door propped. Someone made sure the transport officer got called into the supply closet. We are working on that too. The third thing was that Miles Hartman, on the night after Derek's escape, sat on the porch swing at 11 at night with a cup of coffee in one hand and his radio on the arm of the swing. And he told Kelsey, without looking at her, that he had been offered a promotion. It came with a transfer. It was a good job. It was a job that would take him to Cincinnati by the end of November. Kelsey watched a moth throw itself at the porch light. She thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about all the reasons she was not allowed to say what she wanted to say. She thought about Hope, who was asleep in the bassinet inside, and about Derek Vaughan, who was somewhere in southern Ohio in a truck they had not identified yet, and about a courtroom in Denver 2 months away, and about a life she had not started yet. She said, "Do you want to take it?" He said, "I don't know yet." She said, "Then don't decide tonight." He said, "Okay." They sat on the swing for another hour without talking. Kilo slept between their feet. Derek Vaughan stayed missing for 4 days. On the 4th day, at dusk, an alarm sounded on a small, discreet sensor Ronnie had installed above the back gate of the yard. Angela had put it there the week after the escape. Kelsey was in the kitchen. Hope was in the sling on Kelsey's chest, warm and heavy, half asleep. Kelsey heard the tone. It sounded like a doorbell. It was not a doorbell. She did what Angela had told her to do. She walked slow and level into the bathroom. She locked the door behind her. She sat down on the edge of the tub. She put one hand over Hope's warm little back to keep her quiet. She picked up her phone. She did not have to call. Angela was already dialing. The phone lit up in Kelsey's hand. "Kels, don't say anything," Angela said. "Just breathe. We are 2 minutes out. Miles is at the corner. Kilo is with him. Do not open that door for anyone who is not me or Miles. If someone tries the front door, do not answer. Do you hear me?" Kelsey breathed. She did not answer. Hope stirred against her ribs and did not wake up. She heard the back door of the little clapboard house rattle quietly twice, then a third time, harder, then a very long silence, then the sound of a boot against wood, once, twice, and the frame of the door gave. She could hear him. She could hear him breathing. She could hear him step once on the kitchen linoleum. She could hear the sound of a cabinet opening softly and closing again. She could hear him say her name once in a voice that was quiet and calm and not angry. "Kelsey," Derek Vaughan said from the other side of the bathroom door. "Baby, come out. I just want to talk." Hope on Kelsey's chest opened her eyes and made a small mewling sound. Kelsey pressed her lips to the top of Hope's warm head and did not breathe. "Kelsey," Derek said. "Kelsey, I know you're in there. Come on. I've been driving for 4 days. I'm tired. Just come out." The doorknob moved. Kelsey put her back to the door. She wedged her heel against the tile. Hope started to cry. Derek laughed, a short, sharp laugh that had never meant anything good. "There she is," he said. "There's my girl." The bathroom door bulged inward. The bolt held. He hit it again. The frame cracked. Kilo hit him from behind. Kelsey heard the impact. She heard the yelp that was not the dog. She heard the thud of a body against the kitchen wall. She heard Miles Hartman shout Derek's name in a voice she had not heard from Miles before. She heard the sound of Kilo growling low in his throat, and Derek Vaughan making a wet, angry sound that was almost a sob. She heard boots. She heard Angela. She heard the word cuffs. She heard the word doctor. She heard the word ambulance. She did not open the door, not until Angela's voice, right against the wood, said, "Kels, it's me, it's over. Open up, sweetheart, let me see the baby." She opened the door. Angela took Hope from her arms very carefully, and Kelsey walked past Derek Vaughan, who was face down on the linoleum with a knee in his back and his wrist twisted up behind him, and Kilo standing 3 feet away, with his ears pinned flat and his eyes locked on Derek's face. And Kelsey did not look at him. She did not have to. She had already looked. She had looked for years. Miles was in the hallway. He was breathing hard. There was a smear of blood on his cheek where the doorframe had caught him. He looked at Kelsey, and his eyes did something she had not seen in them before. And he said, "You're okay. Say it out loud." She said, "I'm okay." He said, "Say the baby's name." She said, "Hope Ann Dawson." He said, "Okay, okay, okay." Kilo trotted over and pressed his blocky head against her thigh. She put her hand on his neck. He was trembling. So was she. Derek Vaughan had not come alone. He had come with a second man, a hired driver from an internet forum who had been paid $3,000 in cash to bring him from a truck stop in Kentucky to a specific address on the east side of Riverbend. The driver had not known who Derek was. The driver had thought the job was a repossession. The driver had bolted for his car when Miles came in the back door, and Kilo had run him down at the mouth of the alley without breaking his skin either. He was, by the time Kelsey came out of the bathroom, sitting on the curb with his hands zip-tied in his lap, telling Angela everything he knew. He knew a name. That was the thing that mattered. He had gotten the address, he told Angela, from a man who had introduced himself as Deputy Kirkland in a bar in Chillicothe 3 nights before. Deputy Kirkland had bought him 2 beers. Deputy Kirkland had shown him a picture on a phone. Deputy Kirkland had told him the woman at the address owed a lot of money to a lot of angry people, and that the man he was driving out was the man the angry people had sent to collect. Deputy Kirkland had given him half the money up front, in cash, in a manila envelope in the bar bathroom. Deputy Kirkland's real name was Ross Kirkland. He was a 7-year veteran of the Ross County Sheriff's Office. He had been the transport officer at the county hospital on the morning Derek Vaughan had walked out. He was, it turned out, a second cousin once removed on the Vaughan side, a fact that had not made it into any background check because his mother had remarried when he was 3 years old and he had taken his stepfather's name. Angela Pritchard drove to the Ross County Sheriff's Office at 3 the following morning with 2 federal agents and a warrant. Ross Kirkland was arrested at his home at 3:47, walked out in his slippers, and by 9 the next morning he had traded a full statement for a lesser charge. He gave up 2 other people. One was a bail bondsman in Denver who had been feeding Wallace Vaughan the addresses of women in shelter networks for 8 years in exchange for a monthly payment through a shell LLC. The other was a woman who worked in the records department at the Denver County Family Court, who had been quietly copying protective orders and forwarding them to a personal email address that eventually led back to Wallace Vaughan's accountant. That woman was Diane Halloran of Cheyenne. Diane Halloran did exist. She just did not live in Cheyenne, and she was not, as Ruth Cabrera had thought, a resource for women trying to disappear. The web fell apart in 10 days. Wallace Vaughan was indicted in the Southern District of Colorado on federal charges of racketeering, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit murder. Todd Reeder was indicted the following morning. The Vaughan contracting corporate offices were raided on a Thursday afternoon in early October, and by that Friday evening, a total of 11 people had been arrested in 3 states. Kelsey watched a portion of it on the television Ronnie kept above his refrigerator. She held Hope in her lap and drank a cup of decaf coffee that Marisol had made too strong on purpose because that was how their mother had made it. She did not smile. She did not cry. She just watched. The grand jury convened in Denver on a Tuesday. Kelsey flew out with Marisol and Hope on a Monday afternoon on a small commuter jet in a middle seat that felt like all the courage in the world had been folded into a 5-hour flight. Angela flew with her. Miles did not. Miles had asked quietly if Kelsey wanted him there, and Kelsey had said quietly that she thought this was one she needed to do without him, and Miles had nodded and had made her promise to call from the airport when she landed. She called from the airport when she landed. He picked up on the first ring. Kilo was in the background. Kelsey could hear him breathing. The grand jury took 2 days. Kelsey testified for 1 hour and 18 minutes. She wore a soft grey dress that Marisol had bought her at a mall in Aurora the night before. She held her hands quietly in her lap. She answered every question. She described the drawer. She described the folder. She described the page with the phone number. She described the coffee ring in the shape of a comma. She described the closet. She described the marker. She described the closet again when Priya Anand asked her to, because Priya knew that a story like this had to be told twice for the second telling to be believed. When it was over, Priya walked her out into the hallway. Priya did not smile, because Priya did not smile at courthouses, but Priya put a hand on Kelsey's shoulder and squeezed once and said, "Miss Dawson, thank you." Kelsey said, "Thank you." They flew back to Ohio the next morning. Wallace Vaughn's trial began in the middle of March. It lasted 6 weeks. Kelsey testified twice, once for the prosecution and once, briefly, on redirect. She held her hands quietly in her lap both times. Miles came out for the second week. He sat in the 3rd row behind the prosecution table with Kilo lying at his feet. The judge had granted a specific exception for Kilo because Kelsey had a documented anxiety response and because Kilo, according to the letter Priya Anand had written, had rendered material assistance to the arrest and was an ongoing part of Ms. Dawson's therapeutic environment. Priya had used the phrase therapeutic environment with a straight face. Miles had almost laughed out loud when she said it. Kelsey had laughed. Kilo had thumped his tail against the floor twice and then gone back to sleep. Derek Vaughan's trial came first, actually, in early December, and it was short. He had been charged with, among other things, felony menacing, unlawful use of a tracking device, aggravated stalking, criminal trespass in the 1st degree, felony assault with intent to cause bodily harm, escape from lawful custody, and violation of a domestic protection order. He was convicted on 11 of the 13 counts. He was sentenced to 24 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections with a minimum of 18 years before he would be eligible to petition for parole. When the sentence was read, Kelsey did not look at him. She looked at Priya, who was sitting beside her, and she nodded once, and Priya nodded back, and that was all. Wallace Vaughn was convicted in April on 31 of 34 counts and was sentenced in July to a term of 42 years in federal prison. Todd Reeder was sentenced to 28 years. Ross Kirkland was sentenced to 9 years in the state system for his lesser plea. Diane Halloran was sentenced to 16. The bail bondsman took his own plea and served 11. Verna Whitfield, who had been arrested in Corpus Christi, Texas, in the 2nd week of December, was extradited to Ohio and pled out to a term of 14 years for her role in the conspiracy. She had asked at her sentencing if she could apologize to Kelsey. Kelsey had, through Priya, declined. There was no apology large enough. There was no apology worth the space it would take up. The money that had been paid out over 8 years to hunt down women who had once been married to men in the Vaughn orbit was forfeited to the federal government. A portion of it was ordered to go, by the sentencing judge, to a non-profit trust for victims of domestic terrorism, a category the judge specifically wrote into her order because, she said in open court, that was what this had been. She said it slowly, so that the reporters in the gallery would write it down correctly. They did. Kelsey and Hope did not move back to Colorado. Kelsey did not want Hope to grow up in the shadow of any of it. She stayed in Riverbend. She got a job, part-time, at the little library on Main Street, 3 blocks from Sweetwater Creamery, cataloging donations and reading picture books on Saturday mornings to children who sat cross-legged on a braided rug and stared at her with wide, serious eyes. She bought a small blue house on Sycamore Street with a fenced yard and a magnolia tree in the front, 4 blocks from Ronnie's little clapboard rental. She painted the front door yellow. She hung a wooden porch swing that Ronnie made her as a housewarming gift. She learned to make cornbread from Verna Whitfield's recipe, which Verna had left folded inside a cookbook on the shelf of the old apartment, and which Kelsey had in a small ceremony torn out of the cookbook and pinned to her own refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Kelsey did not believe in wasting a good recipe just because the person who had written it turned out to be a monster. Marisol moved out to Riverbend the following spring. She rented the apartment above Fisher's Hardware. She got a job as a nurse's aide at Riverbend Memorial on the maternity floor, the same floor where Hope had been born. She said on her first night in the new apartment, sitting on the porch swing on Kelsey's front porch with a glass of lemonade in her hand, that she had come because she could not imagine a summer without Hope, and that she wanted to be somewhere that had trees that changed color in the fall. Miles Hartman took the promotion. He moved to Cincinnati in November, the November after the trial, not the one before it. He had waited a full year, and then he had gone. Kelsey had helped him pack. She had made him a casserole for the drive that he ate cold out of the container at a rest stop outside Wilmington. He came back to Riverbend the first weekend of every month. He always brought Kilo. Kilo, who was, by then, getting a little gray around the muzzle and who preferred the porch swing to the yard, would come up the front steps and put his blocky head in Kelsey's lap and let out one long, satisfied sigh. Hope, who was by then walking and then running and then chattering in sentences that had verbs in them, would sit beside him and put her small pink hand on his side and feel his ribs go up and down and up and down, and she would call him her big brother, because that was what he was. Miles never asked Kelsey to marry him. Kelsey never asked Miles to move back to Riverbend. They wrote each other letters, real letters, on paper, in envelopes with stamps. Marisol teased Kelsey about it. Kelsey did not care. There was something about a letter from a good man that could not be replaced with a text message. There was something about knowing that a person, somewhere, had sat down at a table with a pen in their hand and had thought about you for the 20 minutes it took to write a page. On a Saturday afternoon in July, a year and 11 months after Kilo had lunged for a canvas bag in Sweetwater Creamery, Kelsey Dawson walked her daughter through the door of Sweetwater Creamery, one hand on Hope's small, warm hand, the other on her own belly, which was not swelled with anything at all. Hope was going to be 2 years old in 3 weeks. Hope wanted strawberry ice cream. Hope also wanted chocolate. Hope had recently developed a strong opinion on both subjects and would not be persuaded to pick only one. The bell above the door jingled. Presley, the teenager who had picked up the phone that day, was still there. She had grown up an inch. She had cut her hair. She smiled at Kelsey the way a person smiles at somebody they consider a friend. "Miss Dawson," she said. "Hey, Hope." Hope waved with the earnest, full-armed wave of a toddler who has just discovered waving and considers it a serious commitment. Kelsey ordered a scoop of strawberry and a scoop of chocolate, and Presley put them in 2 different little paper cups so Hope could have both without a moral dilemma. Kelsey paid, and she added a $5 tip, and she and Hope sat down on the same wooden bench by the window where Kelsey had once pressed her palm to the glass and pointed at a man in a grey cap. Kelsey looked out through the window. The awning of Fisher's Hardware was still across the street. The doorway was empty. The parking lot was full of small, ordinary cars. A woman with a stroller went past on the sidewalk, and a boy on a bicycle followed her, and a mailman with a leather bag over his shoulder waved through the glass at Presley behind the counter. Kelsey looked down at her daughter. Hope had strawberry ice cream on her chin. Hope was staring intently at the melting swirl in her paper cup with an expression of profound scientific inquiry. Kelsey pressed her hand very lightly to the glass. Not to point at anything, not to hold anything back, just to feel the sun-warmed pain against her palm. She closed her eyes, and she breathed once, deep, and she opened her eyes, and the world was ordinary and quiet and full of light. The bell over the door jingled. Kelsey turned. It was Miles Hartman in a soft blue shirt, with Kilo on a leash beside him. Kilo, who was old now and slow and gentle and gray. Miles smiled at Kelsey. Kelsey smiled back. Hope, at the sight of her big brother, launched herself off the bench with the wobbling determination of a small person who has recently learned that running is only falling forward on purpose, and she went straight for Kilo, who lowered his blocky head and let her wrap her small arms around his neck and let out one long, satisfied sigh. Presley, from behind the counter, said, "2 more strawberries, Miss Dawson." Kelsey looked at Miles. Miles looked at Kelsey. He tipped his head just a little in that way of his. "Yeah," Kelsey said. Her voice caught, but only a little, and only because she was happy. "Yeah, Presley. 2 more strawberries." She sat back down on the bench. Miles sat down beside her. Kilo lay down at her feet. Hope climbed into her lap with the paper cup in her small pink fist and the strawberry ice cream on her chin and one small sticky hand on Kelsey's cheek. And Kelsey held her daughter, and she held the long, slow breath she had held for 1.5 years, and she let it go. If this story moved you, do me a favor and hit that like button. Leave a comment down below telling me what part hit hardest for you, and share it with somebody who needs to hear that there is a way out and there are good people waiting on the other side of it. And go on and subscribe if you haven't already, because there are more stories like this one on the way. Take care of each other out there. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing right there. Hoke.